So, hello, Miss Polnow. Today I'll be talking about my APUSH, what do you call them? Forgot what they're called, but the APUSH things that we have to do. So I'll be doing a podcast, and I'll be talking about pages 958 to page 999. So let's begin. We're gonna first begin with the Cold War, and we'll be focusing on foreign policy, the Vietnam War, civil rights, political change, and some other things. So, under Eisenhower, the United States was locked in a global rivalry with the Soviets, which is obviously known as the Cold War, which emphasized nuclear weapons and deterrence instead of large conventional armies. So, obviously, these armies were very influential in the sense that sorry, I got completely sidetracked. I got a message, so I'll be refocusing right now. They introduced the New Look foreign policy, which emphasized nuclear weapons and deterrence rather than conventional armies. And the United States, things like the division of Berlin really highlighted the national crisis that was going, the crises that were going on across the world. Um, so let's talk about Vietnam. So the Vietnam was due to the United States' belief in domino theory that if Vietnam fell to communism, the area around it would also fall. So at first, Eisenhower was only sending military theorists, but under John F. Kennedy, American involvement increased gradually from financial aid to military advisors to so on and so forth. So let's talk about Cuba. So Cuba was obviously a big concern because it fell to communism after Fidel Castro established a communist government. This led to confrontations like the Bay of Pigs, where the United States and CIA failed to overthrow the government, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the United States and Soviet Union came close to a nuclear war. So the election of 1960 was a turning point. Obviously, John F. Kennedy was a lot better looking than Nixon, and he happened to win the election, and he promised progress in civil rights, space exploration, and economic growth. Um, so let's talk about the civil rights movement, I guess. So the 1960s saw major progress in civil rights. So first of all, there were things like sit-ins and freedom rides and federal action to enforce desegregation, like the Little Rock Nine, as we watched in class. And there was growing activism and leadership. So furthermore, Lyndon B. Johnson eventually took control after Kennedy's assassination, and he launched the Great Society, which aimed to eliminate poverty and racial injustice. And he achieved the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, Medicare and Medicaid, and education and anti-poverty programs. So, so obviously, Johnson also escalated the Vietnam War, which overshadowed his domestic success because of this giant conflict. Eventually, the United States people would eventually grow really sort of um, really against things because they would see stuff like Hanoi Jane and other things. So Vietnam War became unpopular due to rising casualties, media coverage, lack of a clear victory. Public protests grew and then forced Johnson not to seek re-election and divided American society. Finally, the election of 1968, Richard Nixon won by appealing to a silent majority. Same time, the United States experienced major cultural changes like anti-war protests. And finally, there were also youth counterculture, expanding rights movements, intellectual and cultural shifts also occurred. New ideas challenged traditional norms. Finally, in conclusion, there were one of these main notes that were happening. So I think that something Ms. Ponow really emphasizes is the fact that documents are the basis for interpreting uh, that were obviously like the way to interpret things through documents. So I'll be pulling up a document in about a second. So So just give me a second. I just need to. Okay, I'll just make this a little bit smaller. But this is an image of Hanoi Jane, who was one of the main protesters during this time of, and she basically went to North Vietnam and was protesting the war, and she did this through media, and this has created further divisiveness in American society as they sort of debated whether this was sort of the war was actually correct action. And she's an example. If you Google her, her name's Jane Fonda. She's obviously very famous. There's also another famous image with her. Um, and yeah, I think that'll be it for my presentation. This is about 6 minutes and 7 seconds. So about 2 minutes per artifact. Artifact, that's the name. So thanks so much for allowing me for this opportunity, Miss Polnow. I really appreciate all your support. Um, throughout my educational career. That'll sound too cheesy. And finally, I think there's reflection questions. I don't know if I really emphasize these, but my reflection questions were like, what's the most surprising thing? What's so surprising was like how he joined that people she was sort of supporting the shooting down of American pilots. And secondly, the one thing that was most applicable to my real life is something like even though I don't admire the best of Hanoi Jane, I really do admire her courage to sort of go against the American society, even if it was for a goal that is could be viewed as negative. Thank you guys for watching this video, and